Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Those Two Dudes Sports Podcast. I'm with that dude, Josh.
And that's that dude, Ruben.
Appreciate y'all hopping in. Swipe up on the link. We're going to include the podcast, the YouTube link, anything possible. Check us out. Like and subscribe. We're here. We're going to be talking about a ton on the plate. We got Super Bowl Sunday coming up a week from today. Buccaneers. Who are they playing? Buccaneers and Chiefs.
Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes.
First, we want to cover big NFL offseason news. The Rams and the Lions had a huge trade this week between Matt Stafford and Jared Goff. Jared Goff just signed an extension a couple years ago. Matt Stafford, Lions informed him recently that they were looking to trade him. They just did that for 2 first-rounders to the Lions. Insane.
And a third rounder.
And a third rounder.
As far as quarterback to quarterback, I think they're getting maybe the same kind of product. The Rams were just, one, they were tired. They had given up on Jared Goff. 2, they're trying to dump salary, so it's going to help them. I think Matthew Stafford might be a little bit, I know their stats are similar, but I think he might be a little bit more ready to win now. So you do that, plus you're dumping salary. The Rams roster is in a place to where they're ready to win now, kind of just a quarterback away, so maybe they're hoping that Stafford could provide that. I know Stafford hasn't done a lot of winning himself, but if you look at the Detroit roster, I mean, he's typically played on a crap roster, so it's not completely his fault. I think putting him in LA with the Rams, I think he might be able to get them over the hump, whereas Jared Goff wasn't able to. And then if you look at it on Detroit's side, a younger quarterback who's done some winning. They need to rebuild the roster anyway, so it gives them some time to do that while also giving Jared Goff a second chance. He's still young enough. He's only 26 years old. So
hard to say who won. I mean, if you compare them on paper, the stats are going to be the same. Yeah. But quarterback-wise, Matthew Stafford is clearly the better quarterback. Jared Goff was good when the running game was good. He never won games. He won games because he didn't turn the ball over, because the running game was doing well. Matthew Stafford, like you just noted, that team was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so terrible. They had one of the greatest receivers of all time retire in his prime because he wanted nothing to do with that franchise.
Yep.
So Matthew Stafford had little to nothing to do, and he still put up the numbers he put. I think all things quarterback-wise, Rams definitely got the better quarterback. They are in a really good position to compete this year for the NFC West and playoffs and further. You know, who's to say that they wouldn't draft another quarterback to compete with Jared Goff? Or at the very least, maybe in the second or third round, they might draft a quarterback.
I mean, they're already going to be paying Jared Goff a lot of money, though. So, I mean, if you get another quarterback, that's a lot of money just going to one position.
So that's true, but you could have the Matt Flynn effect where they paid Matt Flynn a ton in an offseason, Seattle Seahawks, and then that same year they draft Russell Wilson in the third round. They get him on a rookie contract.
Okay.
And so you end up paying nothing for him.
So yeah, going maybe later in the draft and finding a steal.
Yeah, whoever
so
you
don't
get.
have to pay him too
Exactly.
much. Yeah,
you're on a
that
rookie
makes sense.
contract. You're paying them less. The way you can rationalize it out and say, okay, well, we're paying a quarterback a lot of money.
Right.
That's doing us well, regardless of what quarterback that is.
I think Matthew Stafford is the biggest winner because
Huge.
he's now in a situation where he's probably on the best roster he's ever been on. Where, I mean, yeah, like we already mentioned, Detroit's been a dumpster fire for decades for the most part. So he's in a position where he has a roster that's built to win. I don't know, maybe he'll do good going forward. He's still young somewhat, but has yet to really prove himself. Whereas Matthew Stafford, like you mentioned, has already put up he's put solid stats up with a terrible roster. So to answer your question though, biggest winners, I think we both agree, is definitely Matthew Stafford.
It's definitely Matthew Stafford. I think loser in all this is Rams draft picks. If you remember back when Goff was drafted, like 4 or 5 seasons ago, they gave up 2 first-rounders for Jared Goff. Fast forward 4 or 5 years later, they traded away Jared Goff and 2 first-rounders. Yeah. So they clearly have no interest in drafting. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think in the very short term for the 2021 season, the Rams have set themselves up for a good position to compete. Deshaun Watson. It's been pretty known that he's very unhappy in Houston. He wants out. He deserves to be out. There are players on the Houston Texans team that love Deshaun and that are lobbying him to get out. God, that speaks volumes for that.
So, yeah, he wants out, and I mean, keeping him might cause turmoil, but it puts the Houston Texans between a rock and a hard place. I mean, if they let him go, what do they build around? I mean, I guess it's a full rebuild at that point. I mean, they're already rebuilding, but I mean, at least you have a cornerstone in Deshaun Watson on your roster. But
so you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, but I think it's a lot more. There's a lot more gray area than that. It's not black and white, because if you keep Deshaun Watson, you're keeping a quarterback that isn't happy with the franchise.
Right.
That at any point he could just sit out, lose money. He'd take that because he probably has a ton of money. And secondly, you don't have a future to build on because you don't have any draft picks. On top of that, they signed a GM that Deshaun didn't want or that didn't sign off on. They have a coach that he had no part in choosing, which if a franchise values their quarterback, they will get their input on the GM and the head coach.
From my understanding, he was promised to have a voice in that matter.
None.
And yeah, he wasn't.
No voice.
I think that's part of the reason he wants out as well. So.
That's part of the reason he wants out. And again, it really says something when your teammates are saying, we feel sorry for you and we want you to succeed somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, I mean, they're like I kind of mentioned, they're already kind of in a rebuild mode. So I mean,
they're
get some draft picks.
They're in a rebuild mode, but there's nothing to rebuild because you don't have draft picks.
Yeah, right. So yeah, go ahead and get the draft picks.
And the way you get those draft picks is by trading Deshaun Watson.
And so you dump the contract, you have more money to work with, you get more draft picks, you go out and draft a quarterback.
Yeah.
You have to pay less money, allowing you to sign more players, so they could build that way. And then you don't have the locker room case costs, because obviously if they keep him, it's going to linger on. We've seen this play out with Kawhi Leonard and so many other professional athletes that don't want to be with the organization that they're on. So. And
if there's one thing that we've learned over the last 2-3 years in professional sports, it's that the players are now all of a sudden running the team. Yeah. If they're not happy, they can be out. So if you since they're not happy, if it gets out in the public, as soon as you can, get the best available offer.
At some point, the offers are going to get less and less, because I know the other organizations are knowing that there's going to be a tipping point at some point. They're going to have to get rid of him. So
you need to trade him. Obviously, you need to trade him before the draft. So before April, there needs to be a decision making from the Houston Texans.
Right. Get some draft.
I say you trade him. I know he has a lot of preferred destinations out there. One of them is the New York Jets. He likes to coach there. The new coach, Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator from the San Francisco 49ers. They have a ton of picks to give up, so that is something that can definitely make happen. Another place, which is very interesting from Houston's perspective, is the Miami Dolphins, because not only do they have draft picks that they can trade away, but they can also trade Tua, and that makes them a contender. All they need is essentially there are a few playmakers away from
Miami
being a legit contender.
Really, I mean, even with the quarterback, they're a playoff team. So with Deshaun Watson, they're a playoff team bare minimum right now. So yeah, it makes sense for them, and it kind of makes sense for both organizations, like you were saying.
Yeah, I think Miami, for my money, Miami's the best fit. Well, this Sunday, Super Bowl, whatever, I'm not good at Roman numerals, it's a big one. Kansas City Chiefs, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady, the all-time GOAT, versus baby GOAT Patrick Mahomes, who will be on that list of GOATs much sooner than later at his rate.
There's so many reasons you can be intrigued, but obviously the top one, you're looking at the two quarterbacks. You got the GOAT of GOATs, Tom Brady, and then you got the baby GOAT, who could possibly be. I know he's got a long ways to go, but if he wins this Super Bowl, it could kind of lift him to that point where he might have a chance to reach Mr. Brady, because that would put Brady would still be at 6, he'd be at 2. I mean, the Chiefs might be that team for the next 5 or 6 years at least. So.
That's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary.
I know, they're still a young team, and they got a super Pro Bowl squad basically around him. So
everybody wants to play in Kansas City, not only because they want to play with Patrick Mahomes, but because they want to play with Andy Reid. Andy Reid is a player's coach. They all love him.
And he's an offensive guru. He knows how to draw stuff up like no other. So as far as matchups, I think Tampa Bay's defense is probably a little bit better. I think their defense is better, but it's hard to match up with the Chiefs. They got so many weapons, as we talked about. They got Kelsey at tight end. They got Tyreek Hill at receiver. You got Mahomes throwing it off 1 foot, running to the right, to the left, all the way down the field, 50, 70 yards. So, I mean, they're so stacked. It's hard to stop no matter what kind of defense you put against them. And what do you think?
I think it's going to be close just because it's a Super Bowl. Traditionally, you see a close game regardless of the two teams that are in there. Like you said, there's so many angles to look at this as to how intriguing the Super Bowl is. But I think overall it's the GOAT, Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time. And that's not even a question. If you're thinking, well, is he really? You don't know sports. He is the greatest quarterback of all time. That's a statement. That's not a question.
Yeah.
You really need to appreciate what you're seeing because this is stuff that 25, 30 years from now when you're talking to your kids and grandkids.
It doesn't come along often. I mean, speaking to that, Tom Brady's 43. 43. Like, I remember growing up, all you would see is kickers and punters that were 43. Quarterbacks would be out of the league by age 35.
I remember seeing kickers in the league at 42 years old, and they looked like they were 55. They had gray hair all over.
Like Morton and area. Right? Those dudes looked like they were about ready to go to the nursing home or something.
Yes.
Kicking the ball.
And Tom Brady, man.
Tom Brady's looking like he's 30 years old out there.
He just won the MVP 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is crazy. And it's pretty remarkable, seeing, players, quarterbacks specifically, play at this age, like Tom Brady, like Drew Brees. I know Drew Brees is probably on his way out. The dude's a first ballot Hall of Famer, no question. He'll have a statue in front of the Superdome. Phillip Rivers, he just retired. Eli Manning retired a few years ago. Keep in mind, all these dudes that we're talking about that are retiring and on their way out, they were in the league 4 or 5 years after Tom Brady.
Yeah, that's true.
So, to put that into perspective, I know another quarterback that I feel like this next coming year is his last year has been Roethlisberger.
Yeah, probably so.
I think this is going to be his last year too. Move over to the other side, Patrick Mahomes. So the Chiefs are what we like to call a video game offense.
Yeah.
That it's just full of speed. Tyreek Hill has, if you put him on a video game, Madden, his speed should be a 101. Exceed, how fast it should be. But that doesn't even take away from other players like Mecole Hardman, and they can score almost at will. And Travis Kelce's a tight end. You put Travis Kelce on any other team, he's the number one option.
Yeah.
He's getting 100 plus catches, 12 plus 100 plus receiving yards. He's the number one option.
Yeah.
The Chiefs have 2 number one options. Patrick Mahomes, he made the NFL his toy.
Yeah.
He made it his toy, and again, like if he wins Sunday and he never plays another season, I think he's a Hall of Famer. 2 Super Bowls, he's got an MVP.
I don't know the stats off the top of my head.
The first full year, they went to the AFC Championship game. They lose to the New England Patriots. The second year, they win the Super Bowl. Third year is here.
So you're probably looking at something probably around 13
And so,
or
since he's been a
14,000.
full-time starter,
I just don't know, man. There's not enough body of work yet. Hall of Fame?
assuming he doesn't play another, if they win.
Right. It's a good question because it's not a for sure no. That's crazy to say. It's not a for sure no playing almost 3 years. Two Super Bowls if he wins Sunday.
Yeah.
MVP. I don't know. Kurt Warner, he got in the Hall of Fame.
And his body of work was minimal. He just did it with multiple teams.
Multiple teams, a little bit longer of span, but definitely.
There was a
minimal.
gap in his career when he didn't do anything. Remember, he was
for
with the
about
Rams,
4
and then he went to
years.
the Giants.
He sat out with the Rams because Bolger took his
Yes.
spot. And then he went to the Giants.
And did
I think
nothing 'cause Eli
took-
was there.
Took his spot.
Yeah.
Then he went to Arizona, and I think
He almost went to
battled-
Arizona just to end his career, and he
Right.
revived his career.
Revived it, yeah, because it was him and Matt Leinart were in
Yes.
the QB battle, but
Yeah.
he ended up taking it from Matt Leinart.
So, what are your predictions?
Oh,
Who's gonna win?
predictions, yes, predictions. It's gonna be a high-scoring game. I know both teams are pretty good at defenses, but you're not gonna completely shut down the Chiefs, and I think Brady understands that, so he's gonna be on his best. He's gonna be dotting his I's and crossing his T's. So I'm thinking semi-high-scoring game, maybe high 20s, low 30s. Maybe 31-28, 31-30, somewhere in that ballpark.
So you think it's a field goal or less game?
Yeah, it's gonna be around there.
So you would take the spread because the spread right now is 3.5.
Yeah, 3.5. Yeah, I'm not. I'm getting so 3.5 is Chiefs, right? 3.5.
Chiefs at
Got
3.5.
3.5. Okay, so yeah, I'd probably take Tampa Bay
With the spread, but
Yeah.
straight up.
straight up, I'm taking the Chiefs. They just got too much firepower. I'm going for the Bucks. I'm going for Brady just because he's an old man and he makes me feel young still.
So
yeah,
you're rooting for the Bucks, but you're gonna take the Chiefs.
Bucks, but I'm taking the Chiefs in a close one.
So my guess is I'm picking the Chiefs to cover because it's only 3.5. The Chiefs are just a firepower. They covered against the Bills. They didn't cover against the Browns. The spread was, I think, 10.5. And the only reason they didn't cover is because Patrick Mahomes suffered a concussion and he was out from the middle of the third quarter on.
Yeah.
I think they cover. I think they win. Like Josh said, I'm rooting hard for the Bucks. I'm a huge Tom Brady fan. I think the score is probably in the range of 35-24, 35-27. I think it is a close game. I think the Chiefs cover, and I think the Chiefs win.
What do we got on the docket? Okay, this year was a prime example of a broken system because you got a team like Ohio State who goes, well, I think 6-0. They play a half a season on the schedule, and they're in the playoffs. And you got a team like A&M who play 10 games, almost a full schedule. They're 9-1, and they don't get to the playoffs. But they've played more games, so they have more opportunities to lose and whatnot. But it just seemed like no matter what, Ohio State was going to be in there. I mean, they could have played 5 games probably, and they would have been in there. As long as they didn't lose one of the games they played, it didn't really matter. It's like they had to play themselves out instead of earning their way in.
I know we strongly disagree on this. I think Ohio State deserved it. I think this year was clearly unlike any other year. So one word that you had to use this season because teams were playing less games than other teams was the word eye test. The phrase eye test.
Yeah, we hear that every year.
We hear that every year, but you can also compare records. This year you had to rely on that. So it was very clear that at the very least we knew Alabama was going to be there and Clemson was going to be there. The other teams at question were Ohio State, Notre Dame, A&M. Now I know other teams that we talked about. Josh is a huge proponent of community college football.
I just think you're doing the kids a disservice. It just seems like a mob type thing where only a select few are allowed to go. I don't know.
My thought process is we had the BCS for the longest.
96, 97,
yes,
I believe, somewhere in there.
Yeah, and then it ended in like 2014, something like that.
15, 16 years.
Okay, we had the BCS for that long. The beef with the BCS was it's a computer picking the top 2 teams. Right. It's a computer picking the top 2 teams based on the strength of schedule.
It was a combination. It was a computers plus you had the
polls.
AP poll,
yeah,
coaches poll, and they all play
but the computer was looking at your strength of schedule, was looking at how bad you were beating teams, how good those teams were that you were beating. It took in the AP poll and the coaches poll.
Right.
With that, teams like Boise State were never going to be number 2.
I don't know. I'd argue the other way around because at least with the BCS era, you didn't have you had the computers, but the computers weren't biased. They didn't care what the name on your jersey was. Whereas it appears the 13 old people in that room, they always, whoever's going to make more money kind of gets the benefit of the doubt. So the expansion part was good, but the system put around how we're going to decide those teams is a mess right now, I think.
So do you think we should bring back the BCS for the top 4?
I prefer the BCS system over what we have now with at least 4. I really think we just need to expand and at least do 8. If we do 8, we could get the 5 conference champions in automatic berths. The 5 Power 5 conference champs, and then you get the highest ranked G5 conference champ, and you get 2 at larges. So what we do with that is you're eliminating people picking who should be in the playoff for the most part, other than maybe the 2 at large. But I think you can use the BCS system for the 2 at large berths. I know some people don't like that because what you do when you do that is you give a chance to maybe a 8-4 type conference champion getting in. when they upset maybe a 12-0 team. But I mean, my argument to that is at least you're letting it play out on the field. So no, they didn't have as great season early on, but they won their conference. I mean, that should count for something. And I know another argument against that is it delegitimizes the regular season of college football. I don't think it does. I think it makes more games matter in the long run. Those half of the FBS teams that have no chance right now, I mean, they can go undefeated, see Coastal Carolina, and have no chance. Those teams, all their games start to matter. They have a chance. Those 8-4 teams that are seemingly out of the playoff picture, they still have a chance now when they get to the conference championship game if they win their division. So it makes more games matter, in my opinion. So to me, the only reason we haven't gone there is because of money. But I think eventually, when this contract runs out, this TV agreement type thing runs out, I think they will expand. I don't know if it's going to be to 8. I don't know if they're going to do it in the same way that I want it to be done as far as automatic berths for the conference champions. But I think there will be the expansion's inevitable.
I think 8 teams is too many. I think a 9-3 team winning a conference over a 12-0 team of an upset and having the right to take their spot is absurd.
Yeah.
I think that's absurd. Like, I don't think it should happen. I think we're fine at 4. If we want to expand, at the very most, we expand to 6. And adding more committee members. I think you have to have more committee members. I think you have to have younger committee members. I think that's the bigger thing, is you have to have younger committee members.
Okay. Well, I disagree with that all the way. But if we do go that way, you got to have equal representation from all conferences, I think. All 10 FBS conferences. You want more members, so we could do what? Say two members from each conference. All 10 FBS conferences or something. We'll have 20 members altogether.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I still don't think in the long run, I think the money's gonna win out if you're letting.
And I get some teams are misranked. I think there's definitely upsets. Some teams are misranked. Some teams are ranked higher. They're ranked lower. We want them to be ranked higher. A team loses. They're still ranked higher. We want them to be lower. I truly believe at the end of the day, in November, when these games are played out and they're doing the final rankings, I think everybody is supposed to be where they're ranked. It plays itself out, and the proof of that is the bowl game. Don't you want to use the bowl game as a statement that we deserve better?
I mean,
then they're losing.
You would think that, but I mean, when it's a big team or a Power 5 type team playing a smaller school and they lose, we argue that they don't want to be there. Or I would argue that Coastal Carolina should have been ranked higher than Cincinnati at the end of the regular season because, one, I believe they played more games. They did. I think they went 11-0. 2, they had a better resume, I think. They had the BYU win when BYU was ranked in the top 10. They had Louisiana win, who had only 1 loss, and they also beat Iowa State. So yeah, I would argue that they should have been ranked higher than Cincinnati, even though eye test might have told you Cincinnati was better. I typically lean with the body of work more than eye test.
We both agree Coastal had a great year. I don't think you can have a one-hit wonder in college football. Teams that deserved playoff opportunities, not necessarily shots, but opportunities, were Boise State back in the day, and then late UCF. I think those, because they did it over a span of years.
The committee has said that each year is that year in itself. And
100%. We know they say things, but they act differently.
Right.
We know
the problem.
That's the problem. We know that. Why we disagree so hard on this is not because Josh is rooting for fairness. Because in 2044, when Texas State wins 9 games, he wants to see them represented in the top 25, and he wants them to be in a big bowl game. So he's just trying to speak it into his existence. This has nothing to do with him actually caring about other leagues. He only cares about Texas State.
That's false. I'm a huge fan of all the non-Power 5 teams because I'm against the system. The system itself is broken. I feel like they want to exclude any team that's not part of their little bubble. So anytime there's a good team, whether it's UCF, Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati, I become a bandwagon. Like, those are my second team. So that's not true, But yes, let's eat them up. We're actually recording this video from the great city of San Marcos, Texas, where these Bobcats reside. We're right down the street from the stadium, so eat them up. We're coming.
All right, well, that's it, guys. This has been Those Two Dudes Sports Podcast. Swipe up on the link. Check out all the links from the podcast, the YouTube. Like and subscribe. Throw a comment in. Send us hearts. Send us suggestions, what you want to hear from us, what you want to see us debate, talk about, argue, anything like that. Send all the suggestions, man. We really appreciate it. This has been that dude, Josh.
And that's that dude, Ruben.
You ain't gonna say pound that like?
Pound the like button. Do it. Do it now.